They took the boats. They took the people. Israel's seizure of the global Sumud flotilla and the world's moral failure. Lead. In the dark of the Mediterranean, Israeli forces boarded and seized dozens of civilian vessels carrying symbolic humanitarian aid and hundreds of international activists, including high-profile campaigners, and brought them into Israeli custody. What happened on 1 to 2 October 2025 is not a maritime traffic dispute. It is a dramatic demonstration of power, the forceful suppression of a humanitarian mission, and a test of whether governments and institutions will demand accountability when lives and international law hang in the balance. The facts, stark and simple. Organizers say the global Sumud flotilla set out with more than 40 small vessels and roughly 400 to 500 participants aiming to deliver symbolic aid and to challenge the blockade on Gaza. Israeli naval units intercepted and boarded many of the boats roughly 70 to 80 miles off Gaza's coast. Videos and verified live feeds show soldiers boarding craft at night and people in life jackets being let off their boats. Several prominent activists were among those detained. Kidnapped in international waters, the legal and moral outrage. Multiple eyewitness videos and reporting indicate the interdiction occurred in what organizers and many legal experts describe as international waters. The move raises immediate and explosive legal questions. Under what authority were civilians taken from the high seas and brought to an Israeli port? Governments that profess respect for international law must answer, not with diplomatic jargon, but with concrete demands for explanation, investigation, and remedy. High-profile detainees, global shock. Among those seized were internationally recognized figures, activists, parliamentarians, and public personalities, whose detention has amplified outrage and catalyzed protests across capitals from Brussels to Buenos Aires. South Africa and human rights organizations have publicly condemned the operation and asked for immediate release and due process for the detainees. The images of handcuffed or corralled civilians will not fade quietly. They will define this episode. Why symbolic aid matters, and why the response reveals something darker. The flotilla carried small, symbolic cargo, not a fleet of trucks, because its purpose was political and moral. To shatter the narrative that Gaza can be deprived with impunity. To stop symbolic aid with the same instruments of war used on battlefields is to weaponize legal pretexts and to normalize the extraordinary. When states fail to condemn such measures decisively, they become complicit in the erosion of humanitarian norms. Governments asleep at the wheel. Where are the global governments that claim to defend human rights and maritime law? Where are the immediate, shouted demands for release and independent investigation? Instead of clear and forceful action, we hear cautious statements, calls for restraint, and promises to evaluate. That kind of timidity, bureaucratic, measured, and morally hollow, is an enabling currency for abuses to continue unchecked. The world must stop treating violations as inconveniences and start treating them as crimes that require consequence. What must happen now? Immediate release or humane treatment and due process for all detained activists, with independent legal access. Transparent investigation into the interception, its location, methods used, and any injuries or rights infringements. States must demand accountability, diplomatic expulsions, sanctions, or ICC/ICJ referrals where appropriate, if violations of international law are confirmed. South Africa's public condemnation shows one model of political pressure. Others must follow. Protect maritime humanitarian operations with clear legal protections and international oversight, so civilians attempting to deliver aid are not treated as targets. A final warning, don't let language neuter action. Call it interception, call it detention, or call it what some victims feel it was, an abduction at sea. Labels matter, but they must not change the demand. Governments must stop wringing hands and start applying pressure. The moral calculus is simple. If democratic states fail to stand up when civilians are seized in the open sea, then the rule of law loses another battlement. That loss will not spare anyone. It only makes the world a place where force replaces law and fear replaces principle. Headline ask, front page editors. Run this big. Put the images. Name the detainees being held. Demand answers. Ask your government, loudly, will you defend the rules that protect civilians, or will you excuse their removal? Call to readers. Wake up. Protest. Contact your representatives. Demand immediate freedom for the global Sumud Flotilla and international accountability for any unlawful acts. The silence of governments is not neutrality, it is consent. Sources and further reading. Reporting from Reuters, The Guardian, AP, Al Jazeera, Washington Post, and Amnesty International documenting the interception, the number of vessels and detainees, the presence of high-profile activists, and international reactions.